Okay. All right, recording is progress. We're really getting down to the end. Hopefully, we'll be very close to finishing this chapter tonight. So we are on chapter, what is this chapter? I forget. Chapter 7. The Enneagram is the archetypal symbol. We're going to be just going back to the triangle of triangles on page 131. I know we read this section last week, but just to give us a running start and to keep all three of the triangle of triangles together would be a good thing. As a quick reminder, if you go back to page 124 and take a look at figure 4, and just to remember the wheel here of the Enneagram, we've got the three centers of experience. So 8, 9, and 1 across that top arc is body. 2, 3, and 4, heart. 5, 6, and 7 is mental. And then if you look at the pattern there, starting with Enneatype 9, you've got a yin, and then you've got two reconciling, got a yang, you got two yins, you got reconciling, and then two yangs. So it's that 1, 2, 1, 2 pattern that runs throughout the circle as well. It's the intersection of these two, the center of experience and the energy type that gives us the 9 types, 3 times 3. So every possible combination of those two is reflected in the 9 types. And then if you move just one page over to 127 at the bottom of figure 11, then we can see the three triangles superimposed into the 9 pointed star, which is the symbol that he's using for this book. I wish he had done that on top of the three, but just remember 9, 8, and 1 at the top, that's a body type. And then 2, 3, and 4 is heart, 5, 6, and 7 is mind. And then you've got the alternating 9 is yin, 1 is reconciling, 2 is reconciling, 3 is yang, 4 is yin, 5 is yin, 6 is reconciling, 7 and 8 are yang. So this is what he's going to be talking about of the triangle of triangles. So we've got these three triangles and they're just being offset one. So if you look at the triangle with 9 at the top, you got 9, 3, 6. There's your equilateral triangle. You just move that over 1 to the 1 at the top vertice, and then you got 1, 4, 7, and then 2, 5, 8. So those are going to be the three triangles that he's dealing with. And each one of those is he's going to be considering one of the planes of human development. It's going to be earth, human, and heaven of each of those three, which are showing this ascension in human consciousness. So let's start right at the triangle of triangles section, page 131. Each triangle symbolizes different aspects of a certain stage of the drama of humanity's spiritual quest. All three triangles together portray how the stages themselves form a directional unity throughout the entire quest. So we're going to start with the Earth triangle. I think of the triangle formed by types 9, 6, and 3 as the Earth triangle. In Chinese cosmology, Earth Qi is another designation for Jing, or vital quintessence. Jing is life force in the process of moving from the unmanifest world to the manifest world. It is the energy that guides the basic process of incarnation. So we could probably think of manifest and unmanifest as seen and unseen. So it's going to be in the process of moving from the unseen world to the seen world, from the world of spirit to the world, the physical world. It is the energy that guides the basic process of incarnation, which is spirit moving into bodily form. Held primarily in the lower dantian, it governs our concrete physical and sexual existence. Earth triangle, therefore, seems the best term suited to convey how the three types of the central triangle portray at a cosmic level the drama of incarnation. Individuals of these three types share a certain deep preoccupation with the predicament of embodied existence. Types 9, 3, and 6 are archetypes of the three shocks of embodiment: the loss of wholeness, 9, the loss of emotional connection to source, 3, and the loss of trust, 6. If we examine the three types in the counterclockwise direction, the triangle can be taken as a map of the developmental stages of the soul's fall from essence. I am referring, of course, to the infant's sequential discoveries that life as a body is uncomfortable, beginning with birth, that it is moreover dangerous due to parental failure to protect, beginning with the first year of life. And finally, that one's true nature is invisible to others, most characteristically in the second and third years of life. And we talked about this last time, that these numbers and these ages connected to stages are not hard and fast. You know, they can move around. He's just generalizing here. Next page. When read in the opposite direction, however, the paths of 9 to 3 to 6 to 9 again can be viewed as a description of the human spiritual journey. It begins with the soul's initial merger with essence, 9, continues with its individuation into a human ego or personality, 3, whose consciousness is gradually transformed into the awareness that it is both human, individual, and embodiment of divine spirit, 6. And finally returns to merger with essence again, back to 9. The first direction describes what Sandra Maitri has called the logic of the soul as it unravels into egoic type. The second direction, clockwise, could be called the path of essence, for it nicely conveys the energic movement of spiritual growth. We can also approach the spiritual meaning of the central triangle of types in another manner. The three holy ideas of the Enneagram central triangle of love, hope, and faith, the so-called theological virtues of Christianity, stand to one another in the following way. Love is the universal acceptance of all being, just as it is. Hope is the creative wave of its natural unfolding. And faith is the abiding trust that these two are in complete harmony with each other. You will find a quite similar notion embedded in the title of the most famous text of Taoism attributed to Lao Tzu. The Tao Te Ching is a book that describes how formless presence, Tao, unfolds into each individual identity, De, in such a way that both together form one harmonious relationship, Jing. And he has a footnote there. I don't know how important that is. He says the term Jing in this text is not identical to the term Jing used earlier to mean vital quintessence. The apparent confusion arises because Chinese is a tonal language, and what looks like the same phoneme when written in Roman characters can have different meanings depending on how it is inflected. So there you go. A little bit of egghead knowledge for you all to get for free. So this is the pattern that he's establishing that we read last week for the first triangle, the Earth triangle. He's going to repeat that pattern for the second two triangles, human and heaven. Okay, so we read that really quickly because we had gone through it last week. Any comments or anything that you want to throw in at this point? And I know this is probably the most esoteric chapter that we've read of the whole book, and that is affecting some of you, but just bear with it. I think he wraps it up at least in a way that'll make more sense at the end. So let's look at the human triangle. Rotated slightly counterclockwise from the central triangle is a second equilateral triangle formed by types 5, 8, and 2. I call this the human triangle. In Taoist thought, human qi represents the inner personal aspect of the life force and is said to reside primarily in the heart center. At a societal level, the three types of this triangle share the basic tasks of humanizing embodied animal life, the development of science, politics, and service. If we follow the clockwise direction of the path of essence, we find that type 5 is an archetype of the quest for understanding and wisdom, which, when sought from the point of view of essence rather than ego, produces concrete benefits for the entire community. So that's coming from the balanced and undistorted energy of that type, right? Now, type 8, moving innocently in essence rather than making war in egoic fashion, mobilizes this wisdom and organizes it in order to build and defend a just society. Type 2, when connected to its original energy, permeates that society with a genuine concern for service to all other forms of life without selfish overlays of intrusion or control. In this manner, we see that the human triangle's holy ideas form a map for the creation of an enlightened human society. Omniscience generates truth, which leads to freedom. Okay, do you see that? So omniscience, 5 generates truth, 8, which leads to true freedom, the 2. However, if we imagine the same triangle moving in the opposite direction, we find a path of social destruction. In terrifyingly modern fashion, the cycle describes a society whose members so fear the needs and claims of others, 5, that they become preoccupied with false privileges and freedoms for themselves, 2. And when this fails to produce true happiness and security, react with a resentful rage that is blind to all consequences, 8, provoking even greater attacks from the outside world, 5 again. All right. So what he's essentially done is taking the Enneagram from the micro to the macro. You get that?
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking at individual types and individual people with those types. We're looking at how those types are giving us a collective look at what happens in the macro, in larger numbers and in groups, in societies and nations and so on and so forth, civilizations. And so there's that sense of as above, so below. We're looking now at the larger 30,000 foot view and how it affects what's happening on the ground, but in the macro sense. I think this maybe was hanging us up a little bit last time because we were mixing the two. We were kind of taking what he was saying here, which is macro, and then bringing it back to the individual. And yeah, can't really do that.
William, what did you say at one time where you thought the different countries had numbers? Was there a number that was identified for the US? I'm just curious.
I think we're a type 3, the performer.
Oh, is that what they said? 3? That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
And just having said that, do you see that? I think that kind of illustrates how this works. If you take a look at the American psyche, quote unquote, what the heck does that mean? But I mean, you take a look at the history of our country and the way that we've kind of handled ourselves in the world, even through 250 years, 3 kind of fits, doesn't it?
Mm.
I mean, it makes sense.
performative.
Yeah, performative, but also, we've been the drivers of not only Western society, but probably, human or worldwide development for the last, well, certainly since World War II, if not before that.
Mm-hmm.
But even starting in the late 19th century, with all the inventions that were happening here with Tesla and Edison and Alexander Graham Bell and everything that was going on in the late 1800s into the early part of the century, the automation of Henry Ford. I mean, all of that stuff that has been driving the American engine, it all kind of looks 3-ish, But that doesn't mean that each of us individually are 3s, of course. And there's huge movement within that for individuals to go wherever they go. But as a nation, as a personality for our country, yeah, 3 kind of fits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, contrast that to, okay, what would Canada be? They have a very different sort of national psyche, don't they?
Yeah, I think they'd be a 0. Bunch of complainers.
Hey, William, would Canada be a 9?
I think Mexico is.
Mexico's 9?
But I don't know what Canada would be. But I would guess a 9 as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would guess
But this is the way we're trying to think here in this archetype chapter. We're thinking in terms of the macro. We're painting with a big, broad brush here. Okay, so just remember that and don't try to don't make it personal.
Mm.
Well, I don't understand when the 5 becomes, what is it, counterclockwise or something? The 5 becomes preoccupied or with false privileges and freedoms for themselves. They become 2. I just don't understand that. Macro or micro, I still don't understand. What is false privileges?
Well, that's actually for the 2, not the 5. The cycle describes a society. Now, this is a society whose members so fear the needs and claims of others, that would be the 5 type, that they become preoccupied with false privileges and freedoms for themselves, which would be the
That's the
2 type.
2.
And when this fails to produce true happiness and security, react with a resentful rage that is blind to all consequences, which characterizes the 8 type.
Yeah.
So if we were to go back and look at these types and how they generally process, we would see that those are characteristic to the type. So he's saying that societies that move in this direction are showing this devolution on that earth level, this trouble with embodiment, just difficulties just dealing with the physical aspects of living life. Did that help at all, Ellen? I just mess it up more.
Yeah, no, I don't see, because 2, it says they're the givers. I don't understand how
Well,
they
the
become false
givers,
privilege.
they struggle with pride and entitlement if they're giving to get, right? If they find themselves in that mode, like the giver when they're healthy, right? Like they're giving because God gave to them first, and they give without strings attached, right? Which leads to that sense of freedom, the holy idea for the type 2. But if they're giving with strings attached, it comes with this kind of entitlement, kind of you owe me kind of thing, which is attached to their pride, and which is the passion for the 2s, right? Pride. So Dave, can you walk us through that again? Because I don't have my book with me anymore. I left it on the plane.
Oh, how could you? Well,
But,
hopefully whoever found it is getting a lot out of it, right?
oh yeah, they're enjoying my notes right now, hopefully.
So he basically says in terrifyingly modern fashion, the cycle, this counterclockwise direction of this triangle, describes a society whose members so fear the needs and claims of others, the 5. Now, the 5 is the one who's trying to hoard their energy, trying to protect themselves, from the needs and demands of everyone else. So this taken to the macro level, you got a society that fears the needs and claims of others. You could even think, what's a big fight for us right now is immigration, right? What is that a fear of? It's fear of the needs and the claims of others coming into this country that maybe we can't absorb, or maybe is going to take away. So see how this works in terms of thinking it at a societal level, that they become preoccupied with false privileges and freedoms for themselves. This could be any form of identity politics, I suppose, and people trying to, get claims for their particular slice of whatever it is they identify with. And that would be the negative side of the 2. And when this fails to produce true happiness and security, react with a resentful rage that is blind to all consequences, which would be the 8. Provoking even greater attacks from the outside world, and now you're back to 5 again. So it's a self-reinforcing loop that keeps moving in the negative direction as long as we are reacting from our passions and avoiding the point of avoidance that would take us into the center, into the pivot, right? As opposed to go in the other direction, which can take us into a positive feedback loop. Now, obviously, you can go too far with this. You can overgeneralize, but I don't know. I see what he's trying to say here. Yeah, so I think, Ellen, the main thing to remember is that, yeah, the 2 is the giver, but when they're moving in a distorted fashion, when they're moving in that wounded fashion, then they're going to exhibit the other side of that coin. And so each type has, the light and the dark sides, and that's what we're dealing with here. Let's read the next one, the heaven triangle. Types 4, 7, and 1 comprise what I call the heaven triangle. The word Tian in classic Chinese is usually translated as heaven, but it can also mean nature. In the Chinese cosmology, heaven is not a place in the sky to which dead people migrate. Instead, it represents a state of affairs in which earth and humanity are in natural harmony. Now, that's what Jesus would call kingdom, right? That's the analog there. Kingdom is not heaven of the next life. It's not a place. It's a state of being when earth and humanity are in natural harmony, when we see earth and humanity as one. Heaven, chi, is gathered, heaven chi, garnered, oh man, I'm messing this up. Heaven chi, gathered through the head center, is concerned with the numinous world of mystical experience, which is accessible when the energies of the two lower centers are in equilibrium. So that word numinous there, it's not one we use all the time. That just means something that's deep, something that's mysterious, something that is spiritual, anything that's awe-inspiring. You know, numinous awe is what theologians talk about from time to time. But it gives a sense of the divine. It gives a sense of something deeper. So this heaven chi, gathered through the head center, is concerned with the numinous world of mystical experience, which is accessible when the energies of the two lower centers are in equilibrium. All right, so when the body and the heart are in equilibrium, then the head can take us into this mystical experience. So important. You know, when we're counseling people, especially in early recovery, we always wanted to start with the clinical. We wanted to start with anything that would physically be happening within the person before we try to counsel them, before we try to spiritually direct them, before we try to even help them with their ADLs, their activities of daily living. Start with the physical. Let's see if there's anything going on in the body, because if there is, then these higher levels aren't going to have any purchase. We're not going to be able to do anything with them until we take care of that. And that's kind of what he's talking about. You know, from what's wrong clinically, what's wrong physically with the body, to then what's going on emotionally. What is being held? What trauma is there? What are those programs still running from the trauma of the past that is creating this emotional dysregulation? You get those two in equilibrium, or at least calm enough, now you can start to move in spiritual directions. But it really needs to go in that order. And indeed, the three types found on the heaven triangle each exhibit a strong sense of idealism and sensitivity to the creative and spiritual aspects of life. Viewed in this way, the three types appear as archetypes of mystical development. The yin member, 4, when the yin member 4, when connected to essence, spontaneously recognizes the deeper significance of people and events, and from that recognition supports their authentic self-expression. When aligned with original energy, the yang member 7 spontaneously radiates joy at the self-so beauty of each and every being. Self-so, that would be the being just being authentically itself and nothing else, right? Finally, when type 1 is connected to source, it immediately welcomes each being as an authentic self-expression of divine perfection. The three types, when seen in movement toward essence, thus represent a cycle of ever-deepening spiritual awareness. Origin, which is connected to 4, the intuition of each being's roots in divine purpose generates wisdom, that's type 7, the awareness of life's evolution toward ever more marvelous wonders, which leads to perfection, type 1, the perception of each being's self-so beauty as a work of divine creativity. On the other hand, one could construct a path of spiritual decay for the triangle by moving in the opposite direction. That would be counterclockwise around the triangle. Lost connection to origin, 4, prompts egoic effort to recreate perfection as compliance to standard, 1, which inevitably fails and in turn sets off a desperate search for distraction and pleasure, 7, that only exacerbates the soul's sense of being cut off from its source, 4, once more. Finally, each triangle's own inner structure not only reveals different aspects of the life force's movement within distinct levels of the human drama, but The three triangles taken together symbolize the general evolution of consciousness itself. The Earth Triangle can be read as the story of spirit's devolution into matter, a process that implies both the creative movement of spirit's self-expression as material world and the fracturing movement of spirit's apparent individuation, differentiation, and separation within a material universe. It is the narrative of incarnation itself. The human triangle symbolizes the inborn tendency of physical beings, especially of the humankind, to join together and form individual, familial, and societal attachments as they seek to heal their painful sense of being separated from creative source. It tells the story of humanity's evolutionary movement toward greater understanding and deeper love. And finally, the heaven triangle stands for the final step of spirit's return to source as it achieves ever higher levels of consciousness and ever deepening levels of mystical experience. See where he's going with this? In summary, the Enneagram's 9-pointed star can be seen as a triangle of triangles that organizes into one dynamic whole qualities of being that span the entire gamut of human development, physical, social, and spiritual. As Almas has pointed out, the Enneagram is like a jewel that reflects the whole spectrum of divine brilliance, shimmering over the face of humanity. It is truly a cosmic symbol. Okay, that was a lot of words.
Mm.
Comments?
William's in deep thought.
Mm. No, I was thinking of like in the traditional Enneagram, they suggest that when the type 4, the artist integrates to the perfectionist, that's a good direction. And then to the 7, right, when the perfectionist moves into the optimist position, that's also a good direction for them. But he's saying the exact opposite, like traveling that path is how did he call it? The spiritual decay direction, right? The 4 to the 1 to the 7, he's describing a spiritual decay. But in the traditional Enneagram, it's the opposite, if anything. So that's kind of, yeah, I don't know what to do with that.
Well, the Enneatypes connect differently in the two
Yeah.
systems, right? Because you've got the 9, 6, and 3 triangle, and then you've got that weird irregular hexagon, the hexad thing going on.
Yes.
So those all happen in a different order.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to stick with his order here and how he's doing it. So, that's
'Cause I think too, William, I think what you're referring to, because I was thinking about that too, is again, we're back to the individual on the traditional one, where you're looking at where the individual kind of goes in stress or strength. But I think this one that he's referring to in these triangles are more of the macro, with
Yeah.
a little different perspective, I think. So could be a little confusing, I can see,
Well,
but
wouldn't they parallel each other, your macro and micro, whatever the
That's
pattern is?
what I'm thinking, right?
Right.
yeah, they
You
kind of
parallel.
overlay, I think. I don't know if they're exact, but
Mm.
Right, but it wouldn't like last week we said default evil, but they
Right.
parallel each other.
So
Right.
what country would represent this heaven triangle?
Okay.
well, we're
You
kind of
wanna go
mixing
there, Jennifer?
metaphors now, Jenny.
What?
That's a kind of mixing of a metaphor. I mean, it's not the triangle that would represent the country. We were talking about
Or
Enneatypes
7
that
and the
could
1.
be laid on a
Mhm.
national psyche of some sort, but not the triangle itself. Although each of the 3 triangles, he's saying the 3 Enneatypes within each triangle do have the same preoccupation. So that he said that the 9, 6, and 3, all those types have a preoccupation with embodiment, right? And then the next 3, the 5, I'm not going to get these right. What is it, the 5, the 2, and the 8? They're processing things through heart. even though, there's all three centers of experience within that, but there's something going on with this heart, and then the last three are mind. And so we've got this move, we're up through the dantian, right? From the lowest that is in the lower abdomen to the heart and to then the chest and then to the head. And so we're moving upward. And then he's showing how we're moving from earth through human systems on top of earth, and then finally back to spirit again, which is the same as the Tao Te Ching, right? The Tao is a formless presence that then is culminated in an individual consciousness, each one of us, the Da, and then that brings us back into harmonious relationship if we take our journey, which would be the Jing. And so these are the largest movements that he's trying to connect the Enneagram to. And I suppose it's up to each one of us to, let him know how well we think he's doing.
AI kind of proposes, when you look at the developmental arc, he says, Earth triangle is I become an individual embodied person. And then the human triangle is I learn to live with and contribute to other people. The heaven triangle is I awaken more deeply to meaning, sacredness, and connection. And then I return towards source. So it kind of goes from moving from what number am I to something like how does consciousness move through me, and where am I stuck, defended, growing, or becoming more awake? That was interesting.
And if you think about it, that's lining up perfectly with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Are you all familiar with that? It starts with the physical, it moves up through the developmental, and then finally you've got the spiritual at the top. But like we were talking about with the counseling and the treatment, you got to start with the physical aspects first. If those are out of whack, then you can't, it's not a foundation you can build on. And then you move to the emotional, and then you can move to the spiritual, the conceptual. But you got to get the foundation set. And so this basically is the same system. The earth triangle, the actual embodiment, the incarnation into physical life. And then, as Danielle was saying, now we're all here. How do we work together? How do we form society? How do we treat each other well? How do we establish golden rule ethic and all those sorts of things? And once you've got that in place, you are at least functioning as a decent human being. Now we can take the leap into true higher consciousness and spiritual development. But it works in that area, in that direction. So this is the general shape that he is painting here. It may be like any other analogy. It's going to break down at certain points. It's not going to describe things that we see and so on and so forth. But it's meant to be a general direction. Any other thoughts? Well, tell you what, let's read this last section and see if he can redeem himself and pull this all together. All right? The conclusion he has is symbolism and types. As we close this summary chapter on Enneatypes, I want to reiterate that the Enneagram is more than a typology. A typology defines various categories. The Enneagram is a symbol of the process of spiritual evolution. Definitions and symbols are not the same. This is a real important point that he's trying to make. Definitions and symbols are not the same. A definition puts an end to the conversation. A symbol begs it to continue. A definition is a wall. It says this far and no farther. A symbol is a window in the wall. It says, stand in the right light and I will show you your own features, even as I open to you a vision of what lies beyond. Definitions explain the world. Symbols hide the world within the world. I hope by now it is clear to you that the Enneagram is a symbol, not a definition. It is far more than a list of 9 categories or boxes into which we can put people. Nor is it a spiritual doctrine telling you to renounce your ego in order to merge with absolute mind. It is a window that shows you your own human face, even as it opens your heart and mind to a deeper vision of the cosmic reality in which you are a necessary and principal participant. It is a map of energy currents that flow through the universe as well as through each individual. Almost all spiritual traditions share a certain double vision of reality, often aphoristically stated, as above, so below. The earth is a mirror of the heavens. The human body is a representation of the universe. The soul is poetry declaimed by a self-revealing deity. Seen in the light of the Enneagram, each human being is a microcosm of the energy that both emerges from and flows back toward the entire universe. And that's another big paragraph. But I think, the most important thing that he's saying here, first of all, is the idea between a symbol and a definition. And this is something that we started this whole book with, making sure that we understood that the Enneagram was not just a type. It wasn't just creating boxes to put people in and keep them there and becoming an excuse for their behavior. Well, I'm just a type 9. What do you expect? Of course, I'm going to procrastinate, with no choice whether to change. But that this is truly a map that allows us to be able to move sort of freely within the cage of our own personality type, and our Enneatype and all of that, but also transcend our own limits and boundaries, even though he's going to say later, we don't change those, but we can move toward the center and get into that frictionless place. And that difference to me was the whole reason that I agreed to take on this book in the first place, because one of the reasons that I hadn't jumped on the Enneagram bandwagon as much as some of the rest of you was because I was feeling that it was being handled more like an astrological chart. You're this and you're that, or a Myers-Briggs or whatever. And then I started to realize, no, it is this map. It is this way of understanding how we can move. Just like for me, Jesus' way is the same thing. Jesus' way is that same kind of map. It is that same kind of movement forward. And the Enneagram can really help us with that. Now he's taking this idea, it's not just describing what's happening within our own human selves, but now it has these full cosmic, connections as well. A map of the energy currents that flow through the universe as well as through each individual. And that idea as above, so below, that's something that ancient traditions so followed. And it was huge in astrology, which to them was also astronomy. But even our scriptures say in Genesis that God put the lights in the heavens to be as signs and seasons for the people. And so their idea is that if we watch the movement of the stars and the movement of the heavens at the highest macro level, we can also see it reflected in the movements at the macro level on Earth, if not the individual. That was the Greeks' invention, to take astrology down to the horoscope, down to the hour of the birth of each individual person. But ancients didn't use astrology that way. But still, that idea of the mirror between heaven and earth was there. The earth is a mirror of the heavens. The human body is a representation of the universe. The soul is poetry declaimed by a self-revealing deity. That word declaimed we don't use very often, but it simply means to perform it, to read it aloud in a dramatic way. So the soul is poetry read aloud and by a self-revealing deity. Seen in the light of the Enneagram, each human being is a microcosm of the energy that both emerges from and flows back toward the entire universe. So a very dense way of basically saying we're all one with and indistinguishable from, the movements within and the movements without. And finally, if I were a gifted graphic artist and this book were a computer screen, the diagrams of the Enneagram contained in it would be three-dimensional and alive with movement. Instead of black lines connecting 9 types, they would have transparent channels in which energies of various colors surged back and forth. Such a presentation might prevent you from misperceiving the Enneagram as a static definitional structure. But I would still want to warn you that the movement I have described in the preceding chapters should not be taken literally. The Enneagram is never literal, even as a description of movement. When I, as a 6, shift my energies towards 9 by opening myself and relaxing into the pivot of Tao, I do not become a 9. 4s do not become 7s, then 1s, and so on and so on. As we relax into the full flow of Tao, we do not become new and different individuals or condensation points within it. We remain who we are. As human beings, we are open to the possibilities of the infinite, but we still retain our unique destinies. The fundamental mystery of human existence is its paradoxical status as an integration of two realities, one finite and the other infinite. The integration is the ultimate mystery, for it is neither finite nor infinite. The Enneagram is a symbol in which we may contemplate, but never define that mystery. So the big takeaway there for me is that we don't take this literally, just like we don't and shouldn't take scripture literally, and for the same reason. Because we can't define the mystery. We can only point toward it. We can evoke it emotionally, and we can motivate toward the experience. What scripture is supposed to do is motivate us to recreate the same experience that motivated the writing of scripture in the first place, right? That's what scripture is supposed to do. I love the analogy of sheet music. You know, when we have a sheet of music, the actual notation written down, we say, oh, this is the music. Well, it's not music, it's scratchings on paper in ink. Where that came from was the sound that a composer had in his or her head that then they were able to transcribe on the page. So it went from vibrations in the air to scratchings on a page. But it's not music until you put it in the hands of a gifted performer who then performs it again and recreates the same vibrations in the air. That's what scripture does. It was motivated and written from an experience that in the hands of the reader, in the hands of the person with a transformed heart, can recreate the same experience again. And the Enneagram is doing the same thing. It can help us to recreate the original experience that we had when we were infants before we got burned, right?
Yeah, what I took from that, Dave, was I see it as not a flat set of triangles. I just see a prism of color. It's just, if you're just turning it, there's all colors are hitting at different angles. So it's picking up on these different numbers, and it's 2 or 3 dimensional, really, in a sense. So it doesn't really box anybody in. I like that idea of it, the prism aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
William,
Ellen.
you use Enneagram to understand your clients, but you also use it as your framework to counsel. Yeah?
Yes, there are times it's helpful and there are times it's not.
Ah.
But I was thinking of that imagery that Kathy was just describing, and even more than just like a prism, but a prism that is in constant motion, right? Like the lines that are connecting the different parts are fluid.
Well,
And
but
they're
you as the therapist, you say, like for us in our medical field, first do no harm. But you say, yeah, it helps, but sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
So it can cause harm.
I've never used, well, I don't know if I'm causing harm, to be honest with you, but I don't think I am. I believe that where I've found it appropriate to use it, is like when I'm seeing clear patterns, and I might not even tell the client that I'm using the Enneagram. I might just point out like the tendency of a giver to develop a sense of pride, right? And givers can easily identify themselves as givers, and they can easily recognize when pride is getting involved. So we can talk about how pride leads to interpersonal conflict and things of that nature without really talking about the Enneagram at all. I mean, I would probably have to be working with a client for quite some time before I introduce them to the Enneagram. But even when I'm doing an intake, I might already begin to spot if this person is like an 8 on the Enneagram and what that looks like, right? Like I have a client right now, we are using like symbolism, and he described himself as being like a pit bull who is always patrolling the perimeters, making sure that everything is safe and looking out for danger and so on and so forth. And always, trying to figure out who is friend or foe and what needs to happen in that space and what that looks like as a strategy in life in general versus what it looks like as a strategy at home, where he sees himself as a good guy who protects his group, but his daughter doesn't talk to him anymore and doesn't want him to be around the grandkids. And what does that discrepancy look like when you see yourself as the pit bull who protects your family, but members of the flock are afraid of you because you're a pit bull? Right. And what does that look like? So we can talk about Enneagram type tendencies and how it shows up without really talking about the Enneagram per se.
But it gives you a window into what's going on.
Yes,
Just jumping
absolutely.
off of what William just said, when I was in formation and in pastoral training, one of the required books that I had to read was called the Handbook of Denominations, and this was just a book that had nothing but, I don't know. There had the dozens upon dozens of Christian denominations, from the mainline denominations to Catholic to Orthodox to LDS to Christian Science, all these different. And I thought, where in the world am I ever going to use this? I'm reading through all this stuff and all these different denominations, and it's just like, well, this is ridiculous. But I'll tell you what, when you get into counseling and you know that someone says that they grew up Reformed, and you know that Reformed is Calvinist, and you know what Calvinist means, it gives you the same kind of window into the core beliefs and the inner workings of the person. And you have a way that you can start to talk to them and start to shape the conversation in a way that you can help them. So
Mhm.
for all of us, as we study the Enneagram can give us that kind of insight, not only to others, but to ourselves. We can start to heal ourselves. We can start to um, coach and counsel ourselves if we understand what our tendencies are. They're not locked in stone. We can't take them too literally, but we can see the pattern that William is talking about, and that can help us to navigate.
Mhm.
And maybe at the macro level too, when we look at our nation and we look where we're headed and we look at these movements of various people, and we can recognize, different patterns that we have seen in operation in the Enneagram, and maybe it can help us. Maybe nothing we can do about it at the macro level, but at least it can help us to understand. One of the most eye-opening things that I learned when I was so dealing with a difficult conservative evangelical community that was completely intolerant for anything that I was learning. And I couldn't tell them. And if I did, it was only met with hostility and just, open revolt, was when I learned about the stages of spiritual growth. Those four stages just opened up the whole world to me because I suddenly understood what stage 2 meant and why they operated the way they did, why they had to, out of the fears and the walls of the groupthink that they saw as their salvation. You don't mess with that. And then I understood, but that helped me to be able to deal with them better and especially to keep my own resentment from going off the rails because I understood that fear. I knew that fear. I just didn't understand how it was being projected through the group. So all of these things together, maybe they help, maybe they don't. If they don't, put them on the shelf. You don't need them. But if you really consider how they can show you certain patterns that maybe were opaque to you before, it can maybe give you a leg up.
Mhm.
I think we started out by saying that the Enneagram is really a tool to put in your toolkit. Really, it's part of your stuff you pull out and use it as needed, like William does, or
Yeah.
at various aspects. You're not going to go testing all of your clients, William, but you're
Mhm.
using it as insight for yourself because you can see and know and sort of profile them in a sense because you're getting to know them so deeply. But yeah, it's a tool for your toolkit, your tool belt, if you will.
Yeah, and I firmly believe in the idea that to label me is to diminish me in some way.
Mhm.
So I don't ever want to label any of my clients in any way, shape, or form. But if I'm noticing the role of pride, for example, and how that's showing up, I know I can talk about pride using Enneagram language without really getting into too much specifics. And you know, it's like when you pivot from pride to humility and all of the kind of stuff that the Enneagram is pointing us towards, I find it very, very helpful clinically.
I was thinking from like an empath perspective or a highly sensitive person
Hmm.
perspective, that having a base kind of a loose framework for some of this might be a really good way to help you work with people. I mean, just as a human who's dealing with all of those things that feel very swirly to people
Right,
who are feelers, to be able to just kind of go, this could be a little bit like that. And this could be, it helps you understand people so you're not internalizing everything,
right,
like everything is you,
right, right.
Helps you to
And
become unoffendable.
That's the
yeah,
idea.
and when I can talk about a personality type where I approach the strengths and talk about the idea that the brighter the light, the greater the shadow it casts, right? And I can talk about strengths and how those strengths show up as weaknesses, where I can literally do like the shadow work kind of stuff we had talked about in here before, where we're looking at the whole person rather than just one pathological aspect of their personality. And you can compliment somebody and criticize them in the same breath, and they can hear it a little bit better when I have the Enneagram in mind, because I'm not just, and it's one of the things I liked about this book. It doesn't pathologize so much. He did more pathologizing in this chapter than he did in the previous sections. But the idea of not viewing things as either good or bad, it just is.
Mhm.
It's just how it shows up.
Mhm.
That language works for my clients as well, I think.
Yeah.
The last paragraph is what you're making me think of, that I don't become a nine, I don't become something else. I go through
Mhm.
channels.
Yes, yes. And kind of like if you think of this as like all the pieces are in constant motion in this three-dimensional way, and they're connecting back and forth, it really gives a much more nuanced, layered view of people rather than you're just a one. It's like you're interacting with all of these different dynamics, and it's in constant flux, not just for yourself, but in constant flux in relation to the people around you, who's in constant flux themselves. And it's this,
Even Canada.
Even.
But I like that it also has an aspect that there's still an authenticity to who you are, even
Mm,
though your prism is bouncing off and pulling energy from different numbers and colors and whatnot. But in a sense, you still are who you are. It's not like today you're a 9, tomorrow now I'm a 4, and to
right.
Tuesday I'm a 6. That's
Mm,
crazy making. You're all over the place. You
Yeah.
still have an essence of who you are, but you're
mhm,
pulling and you're drawing energy, or you're diverting, and so that's where the oscillating, I think, is kind of beautiful in a sense, but you still have a core of who you are. And
mhm,
those people out there that don't know who they are, it's kind of fun to help you figure it out.
mhm.
We'll get Bill Protzman's number one of these days, right?
It's almost as if we need that point of identification, like the Enneagram years ago served as an anchor and really brought people where people really identified as, okay, at my core, put words to maybe the lives that they were living. And then what Schaefer and others are, illuminating is that while we have that as our core, the energies, we all go through all the different, because
Right.
we're all dealing with life and yeah, but to stay unattached to over identifying as
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And an old school might have been, okay, all the 9s, go over here and sit
Yeah,
in this corner and be yourselves and talk amongst yourselves.
yeah,
It's too isolating to
yeah,
separate that way. It's not
yeah.
this is much more,
Mhm,
pulls it together better, I think.
mhm.
So where he's going from now is going to get practical again. So like William said, this was his move into the mythical, his move into the archetypal, and so he got really out there, and now he's going to bring it back into the practical. And so just kind of like what we did on Sunday, we're talking about Stoics and Stoicism and the 8 points of 8 core principles of Stoicism that I was relating to passages from the New Testament, but to get really practical. And Jesus was really practical. He didn't get into the esoteric, theological places. He kept everything practical. What is the next indicated step that you can take that is going to continue you on this path toward having this mystical experience, to having this experience of oneness? And so that's the place he's going to go next. And so I think it'll bring everything back down to earth from this little trip that we took the last few Wednesdays. So
Mhm.
hopefully we can find some specific things that will help us along the way. All right. We doed it. We're getting down to it. We're probably only maybe 3 more weeks in the book. So have any of you given thought to the next book? We talked about last week, we talked about Thomas Merton. Again, Judy's not here, and she was the one who was all excited about Merton. But we can go into Merton and do some selected readings from an anthology, if that is of interest. The other book that I thought might be good for us to read or interesting would be My Stroke of Insight, which was the one I was reading from the last few Sundays about the neuroanatomist who had a hemorrhagic stroke on her left side that brought her into a completely unitive experience, and how that has reshaped her life ever since. That might be of interest. It'd be a different kind of book for us to read, much more just narrative, but that would be another possibility. Uh, any thoughts along those lines? Anything that you all have thoughts since we brought it up?
I
Just
like the
excited that
Thomas
you liked the
Merton.
book. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Lindy.
No, I just like that you liked My Stroke of Insight. That I loved that book. So I'm glad that you were finding parallels and things to talk about from
Oh
it.
yeah, I read some extended passages from the book on successive
Yeah.
Sundays. So yeah,
I
it
found it
really is
very spiritual, but it was neuroscience laying on top of what we talk about in church at the effect. So anyway, I just thought it was fascinating coming from a stroke perspective.
good. Someone else was saying something too. Who was that?
Yeah, I was waving the Merton, Thomas Merton flag. Yeah, I like the idea of doing that ontology as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I like, well, if we're gonna choose one or the other, to me, I go for Thomas Merton because although the neuroscientist has insights, I don't want to go into the weeds of the neurons of the brain and so, that I don't know if she discusses that, but I don't want to, read about that. It's clinical.
I don't know that she goes so clinical as she goes left brain, right brain. And yeah.
Now, it doesn't read like a clinical textbook, if that's what you're thinking. you
Yeah.
know. But Marian had a comment too, does it bring God into the picture? Well, no, it doesn't do that. And so that was something that, something to consider, I suppose.
I'm for Thomas Merton.
Okay.
That's my vote.
But also, well, yeah, if it's not too clinical to me too, if it gives insight into us, I think that's part of God too. I mean, that's part of
absolutely.
our insight into each
Yeah.
other and myself.
Well, you could pull pieces of that into the discussions at times too, Dave. So
Right.
Of course, we would do that, just like I've been bringing Christianity into this book, which is, been focused on the Tao. So yeah, I'm always going to be bringing those parallels in, but maybe it is time to focus on something that's more decidedly Christian,
Yeah.
even if it's Catholic. Catholics are Christians too.
Even if, like I told you about this lady who I was offended by because I said I'm Catholic, and she said, "Yeah, we'll turn you into a Christian."
Yeah, that's worth at least a pout, Ellen. I get you. I get you.
The
Well,
Catholics are the ones who say they're the Christians, right? Don't they?
Everybody has their point of view. I will let's say we're going to start with Thomas Merton. I'll send you the links and the information so you can get your books. It's the type of thing where we're going to be picking and pulling, or I'll be picking and pulling some of my favorite passages. And so, we can kind of start and stop at any time we want to. So it's not like we're going to be slavishly reading the whole book. We're not going to do that with this. So it's going to be more doing excerpts and reading. And if there's a lot of interest in this one section, maybe we can do more in that particular excerpt, or we can do less and move on. So I think we have more room to move in something like this. And then, like I said, at any point we can cut it off and we can start a new book. So it'll give us some freedom. Let's do that. All right, I'll send you the information so you can start ordering. And because, like I said, we don't have a whole lot of time left in this guy here. So, cool. All right, everybody. Scotty, where the heck are you?
Here
you are.
Lord, thank you for this time together and the things we learn and the experiences we're having and just everything that's unfolding in front of us. It's interesting. The last word I'm looking for, Lord, is just thank you for everything that you're doing and being with us as we go experimenting and exploring and trying to learn what we need to learn, what we want to learn. As long as we learn it with you, that's where the grand adventure is. We love you, Lord. Thank you for being here and all that you do. It's in your precious name, Lord Jesus, that we pray and we give our thanks. And we say our name.
Amen. All right. Remember, if you're local here, come and join us Friday night for the movie night. We'll be screening The Kingdom of Heaven and great Ridley Scott film. And if you're not, maybe watch it anyway. Watch it, in sympathy with us. It's a great movie. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it. And then we'll see you on Sunday.
Tell you what, Dave, I'll watch it again, but
thank you. Give it another try, George, because I think
I just watched it a couple days ago.
I know, but I think you missed the point, my friend.
No, I didn't miss the point. It was just like
bring it in.
I thought I was watching Braveheart for a minute. You know what I mean?
Bring
It's
it
like
in.
all that violence.
Bring it in.
Right. But I'll try. I'm not going to promise.
Okay.
Because I did watch it just recently. That's why I asked you if it was a 2005 film with Liam Neeson Ed Norton and Orlando
That's the
Bloom.
one.
Yep.
Okay,
Alrighty.
everybody, good night. We'll see
Have a
you
great one.
one way or another soon.
Take care.
Good night.
Pastor Dave, can you stay on? I have a couple questions.
Bye, Jordana. Good night, sweet.
Do you have
Okay.
time?
Okay.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Jordana.
See you Friday.
Pastor, do you have